Yeah. Family, y'all. Just keep it tight, keep it tight, keep it tight. All right. Yeah. Here we go, here we go.
In the Eastern Church, or the Orthodox Catholic Church, how interesting. So many of these developments are in the Western Church, which we are heirs of. We're heirs of many of the things that have happened in the Western Church, living in the Western world. But in the Eastern Church then, what happened was that the rite remained intact. So how interesting in the Orthodox Catholic Church, this whole division of baptism, confirmation, Eucharist, wait a minute. That wasn't even an issue for them. All happens the same day. You mean the infant who's baptized receives its first communion?
Yes.
It's not even eating milk yet. It's not even eating anything but milk yet. Well, the child receives first communion. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, the solution they had was that the priest simply dipped his finger into the consecrated wine, the blood of Christ, and dipped that to the child's lips. The child has received his first communion.
Was it only the Orthodox Church? Because Gonzalo got that done, so was it?
There you go. So it depends on the time and the place and the church and the minister, but there are some people who look at this ancient practice and say, is there any reason why the child that I baptized today should have to wait 6 or 8 or 10 or more years to receive the first communion when it can just be done today?
Yeah.
You dip the finger in the blood of Christ, you've received your first communion.
Ooh. And they thought I had the hiccups.
So how interesting, because once a child receives his or her first communion, you've received it.
Yes.
And what a beautiful thing that there will never be a moment in that child's life when he or she does not remember not receiving the Eucharist, because from the time that they were 3 or 4 or 5 years old, they received the body and blood of Christ with the family, with the community. There wasn't this, I have to wait until I'm 8 years old and go through 2 years of class. So the churches of the West evolved in a different way. Churches of the East kept them intact. Churches of the West then, according to Eastman, evolved in a confusing variety of positions and practices as a result of the division of the primitive rite. Right? So now in the Western Church, of which we are heirs, we find baptism at one stage in life, First Communion at another, Confirmation another, with all sorts of requirements and all in between. That's not what the original church had in mind, the primitive church, and that's not what the Eastern or the Orthodox Catholic Church continues to do today.
And even after your 5th birthday, if you're not baptized, you still have to go to like an RCA for
There you go.
children. Or
So in the Roman Catholic Church, we were always told, for instance, if you can be baptized as an infant through 5 years old, but if you turn 6 years old, it's not just pouring the water over you. You've got to go through this rite of preparation now, the rite of Christian initiation for adults, which in many places, in the parish where I found myself previously, was a year-long program. Right? We prepared the kids for a year to be baptized. Interesting. So Peter Hinchcliffe says, the Western fragmentation, so this fragmentation of the rite in the Western Church or in the Roman Church, led some churches to treat confirmation as a separate and second giving of the Spirit. Others to treat it as a renewal of vows, confirming your faith, and regarding water baptism as the complete and only sacrament of initiation, yet others to insist on water baptism of believers, rejecting infant baptism and abandoning confirmation. Simply to say that once you split these apart, you're going to have different people having different views on what we should be doing. If we had stuck with the practice of the early church, wow, you're cleansed through the waters of baptism, you're anointed with the Spirit and the laying out of hands, and you receive your first communion, boom, done. You're a full member of our community. We don't have all these theological discussions that we're going to have for the next 2 nights, especially the night that we talk about confirmation. The night that we talk about confirmation, we're going to be sitting here scratching our heads and saying, we wouldn't even be having this conversation if we were heirs of the Eastern or Orthodox Catholic Church, where it's not an issue. Instead, we find ourselves in this situation where people have been baptized but haven't received their first communion, haven't received their confirmation, and so they're waiting for Archbishop Johnson to come so that they can be confirmed. Or they're part of some 2-year program in a Roman Catholic parish somewhere, waiting to be confirmed because they weren't confirmed as a child, because this rite has been fragmented into 3 separate sacraments in the West.
We are